Hello, and here we are looking at simplifying expressions with one variable, this time just looking exclusively at multiplication. Okay, some questions for you then. They build up just a little bit as we go down the page. N times n, that simplifies to n squared. 5n times n. So if we separate that out, what we've got, 5n stands for 5 times n, and then we're going to times that by n. So that 5n is that 5 times n. 5 times n times n, well, we said that n times n simplifies to n squared, and then we're going to times that by 5, so we can write that as 5n squared. Okay, 5n, as we said, stands for 5 times n, and then we're going to times it by 7. I can rearrange the order that I write those multiplications in, and I could write that as 5 times 7 times n. If you don't believe me that you can write the multiplication in any order, then have a look at this video that I've just put a little link to in the bubble. It's all about the commutative property of multiplication, and it uses cookies as an example. It's only about 1 minute 20, and it's very useful just to see that you can actually reorder the things in a multiplication and it still works out. Okay, so now that I've reordered them, and I've hopefully will have the chance to convince you that 5 times n times 7 is the same as 5 times 7 times n, we can simplify the 5 times 7 bit to 35, and then the times n bit to that 35n. 5n times 7n, so we've got 5 times n times 7 times n. 5n is that bit, 7n is that bit. Rearrange them, so you've got 5 times 7 times n times n. What do you get? 35n squared. Just. Whew. Okay, 5 times n, that's that bit, and that is times 7 times n. So rearranging, and you would get 35 times n times n times n, which is 35n cubed. Okay, you're starting to see the pattern now. 5 times 7 gives you the 35, and then we're timesing by n squared, which is n times n, and by another n squared, which is another n times n. So what do you get? You get 35 times n to the power 4. I'm not giving away any rules about multiplying index numbers at this point. That'll have to be for another video. So 5 times 7 will get 35 times n cubed, which is n times n times n. We've got to multiply it as well by n squared, which is n times n. And you get 35 n to the power 5. What is going on? Right, well, if you've already worked out the pattern and worked out what might be going on, hopefully this will cement it for you. 5 and 7 you times together first, that gives you 35, and then we'll need to times by n cubed, and another n cubed, and that gives you 35 n to the power 6. Okay. All of those examples work nicely for any variable. Okay, there's another video coming up next week where we'll be multiplying and simplifying expressions where there are two different variables. So for example, if that n was not an n but an m, 5n times m, that's the kind of thing we'll be learning about in another video. But what I do want to do is to quickly make the comparison between multiplying and adding. So n times n gives you n squared, but n add n gives you 2n, and they are very different. The only time that they'll be the same is if n is equal to 2, but otherwise you're going to find or 0. but otherwise you're going to find that they're completely different. 5n times n gives you n squared, but 5n add n gives you 6n. Here you multiply the 5 and the 7 together and then times by the n, that gives you 35n. But here you can't simplify it, it's already fully simplified. So it's 5n plus 7. Here when you multiply 5n and 7n you get 35n squared, but when you add them you just get 12n. Here when you multiply you can get them all into one term, you get 35n cubed. But here when you try adding them you've got an n squared plus an n, and they don't add together. So you keep them separate, and this is as simple as it gets. Okay, we've seen how we get 35n to the power 4. 5n squared and 7n squared, well, these are now sort of the same, at least in the same family. We can add the n squareds together. Here we've got 5 of them, there we've got 7 of them, altogether we've got 12 of them. We've seen that. What about if you try adding them? Well, they're different, so that was already simplified. They're the same, yeah, you can't simplify them anymore. Okay, we've seen how to get 35n to the power 6. When you add them together, okay, we can simplify this because we can see that they're both n cubed, so then you just add the coefficients and you get 12n cubed. Okay, that was that. Feel free to rewind, go through particularly the first part, go back to the beginning and just quickly see how I did the simplification with the multiplications. Okay, thanks very much for watching. Bye.